Hey friends, this is Dolynny TV. Good morning to you as we get things fired up for day number 2 of, well, the offer sheet situation with Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. Of course, this day might be a little out of date, this video here, by the time we get going this morning. Of course, trying to post this about 6:30, so nothing should be breaking unless something breaks overnight for you. But of course, I wanted to talk about kind of a couple of situations here for the Oilers that are going to line up, not just necessarily because of these offer sheets this year, right, going through this season. It's next season the Oilers truly have to worry about. And, well, these offer sheets are going to be a bit of a problem 2 years down the road, right? So not this season, next season. We'll discuss that in a matter of moments. But if you're new to the channel, I highly encourage you to hit that subscribe button, friends. We are going to have a ton of Oilers news coming down the pipe to end August. And then all of a sudden, captain skates, training camp, rookie camp, bing, bang, boom, regular season just like that. So giddy up. That said, what do we know? What do we know? What we know is the fact that, well, as it currently sits for the Oilers and how it all plays out, is these offer sheets are 2-year deals. They're high AAVs for younger players that maybe the Oilers weren't going to pay that much for. I think that wasn't the plan at all, and that is why they ended up accepting to sign an offer sheet. So that's the case we're operating in now. So where are you going with this, Tice? Well, I'll tell you this right now. The big thing for the Oilers is you got to get Draisaitl signed this offseason. His contract extension will kick in the year after, right? So now you're talking about the cap space for a guy like Draisaitl being eaten up a little bit. Not necessarily all 6 point whatever the heck for Holloway and Broberg, but some of that was probably calculated to go towards a guy like Leon Draisaitl. Now, of course, that's only for next year, so you're kind of situating there. You're already losing that cap space this year to function, right? You got to move a roster piece. You got to send some guys down, operate with a lower roster, whatever the case might be. Yes, Kane, LTIR, keeping Broberg, trading CC, that's probably your cleanest way. But again, you're doing some gymnastics to make it work this year. You're cutting into the Draisaitl budget next year. And by the way, these guys need contracts again when now you've got to sign McDavid. And of course, yeah, as well, Bouchard, 2 extensions, right? That's where we're sitting at right now. So you're kind of sitting at this situation where that money will be kicking in those years. So at current, you're talking about signing extensions for when they'll be UFAs or RFAs, whatever the case might be with a Holloway and Broberg and those years to come. But you're talking now eating up this money, and then money that you would kind of set aside for Bouchard and McDavid next summer for the year after is going to be also needed for Broberg and Holloway, especially if Broberg progresses and Holloway progresses the way they are going. You don't want to lose them if you wasted all this time clearing cap space this year to keep them, if that makes any sense, right? If you're doing all this effort now to keep them, and then you kind of get through eating a little bit on the Draisaitl extension and having to sacrifice maybe something next year. And then, of course, you're going into the RFA years or into the next free agency period with both Broberg and Holloway also in mind of having the McDavid and Bouchard extensions kicking in. There's a lot to go there. So, yeah, there's going to be a ton to get to here over the next 3 years in oil country. It's going to be madness. And that's where this whole summer is going to play out beautifully. So when it comes down to talking about trade targets, obviously the Oilers at some point are going to need to alleviate a heavy contract. Something over $5 million for a player that one of Broberg, one of Holloway should and will replace long term. Now in the video last night, or whatever you're talking about, when I was talking about the absolute disaster for the Oilers, little did I know Bob Stauffer was going to drop a bombshell that in December, January, Ken Holland and Jeff Jackson dropped the ball on signing Holloway and Broberg. Then, fair game. But, right, Broberg's a guy that could long-term replace Darnell Nurse. You can always sign someone with that Cody Ceci money plus cap inflation to go out and solve the top 4, right? I mean, you go figure out Ekholm kind of plays on the second pair as he ages. Broberg, Bouchard together, that's a pretty high octane pair if potential is met from both players. Okay, so that makes sense. Now Kane, right, you've got a situation with him where he could very well be replaced in terms of the physical nature, not necessarily dropping the gloves, but going in, kind of speeding around, hitting guys, and then also scoring goals by Broberg Holloway. Those two guys are easily replaced by the guys you're trying to keep around right now. That's obviously big picture, long down the road, but whether it be a trade this year from the Oilers to solve the cap space problem at some point with Ceci, there is going to be a need to be made move of a bigger size, right? I mean, you're talking $3.5, $4 million isn't going to do the job long term, especially with Bouchard, McDavid, and Draisaitl, all those extensions kicking in. And then, of course, if you keep around Holloway and Broberg, you're going to have a little bit of a nightmare there. So that is where the Oilers desperately need to make that big move. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next month, it might not be this season, but there is lining up, and I think a lot of folks would say, oh man, we should have traded Nurse long ago. The problem is, right now, you're already staring down the barrel of having to trade Kane, which we've talked about all summer. You're already staring down the barrel of, oh man, we'll ride it out one more year with Nurse and try and win the cup, but this team is going to lose a core. If you're talking about there's 6, 8, 10 guys on this team that are the Oilers, heck, even Mattias Ekholm in there. I know kind of when you get down the path there, his free agency comes up and it doesn't really factor in. That's why I'm not talking about him. But at some point, the Oilers are going to have to shed a salary. And Nugent Hopkins, goodness sakes, I hope he's an Oiler for life. But you get where it's going. This is kind of, if you blow this up big picture, this just got really messy for the Edmonton Oilers. And the simple solution is you let Broberg, Holloway walk and you just clean it up that way. You take the picks, you go a first, second, and third round pick at the draft or at the deadline, trade for a top 4 defender, you keep Cody Ceci in his current spot, and away you go, right? I think you trade out Ceci with that stuff to clear cap, get the new guy in, bing, bang, boom, you've got a solid top 4 for the playoffs. I get that. We did that a couple years ago with Tyson Barrie from Mattias Ekholm. Fine. But again, I think the Oilers' priority, and it should be stated that they need to make it a priority, that you got to have young guys ready to fill in the aging guys that continue year after year over the past 3 years to take us to the Stanley Cup playoffs in deep second round, third round Stanley Cup final game 7. You get where I'm going, is you got to have somebody to replace these guys, and Broberg's a talent that, I mean, we saw what happens when he gets a chance. You got to keep him around just in the pure potential that's still there in that player. Holloway, maybe less of a chance, right? I mean, injuries kind of have been an issue there, but for Holloway, if you can get a Kane production type player out of that and you can kind of punt the contract down the road 2 years, you got to do it, right? So that's where I would be interested to see here what happens for the Oilers. But again, the immediate term is the offer sheets and clearing cap space now. We all know that Cody Ceci is the most likely guy to go. Don't have to talk about that. But down the road, a guy like Darnell Nurse, a guy like Evander Kane, a guy like, I don't know necessarily, the contract situation probably doesn't work out for Mattias Ekholm, but anyone like Nugent Hopkins, I'm even going to throw in there. The bigger contract guys are going to be in a world of hurt. And yes, Jeff Skinner comes off the books. Yes. But you still need the guys, right? The top 12 guys in the lineup right now are there for a reason. We don't have these guys signed because we're just handing out bum contracts to have some name in the Oilers lineup that isn't from the Finnish second junior league, right? That's not the days of the Oilers we're in anymore. So it's going to be interesting how they keep the contention piece with McDavid, Draisaitl together, and then as well kind of continue to grow those younger guys into more contracted guys with heavier contracts, while also maneuvering out guys that have the bigger contracts. And obviously, we thought maybe some detractors of the Oilers would have thought that we'd be having this discussion right here at this moment about Zach Hyman, but we're not. So there's going to be some conversations to definitely be had here. And I guess, too, if you're talking about moving okay, maybe you do that right away. But you also, while he's on LTIR. Then you move him out, and then you move out Nugent Hopkins because Holloway's ready to take the top left wing position. I don't know. There's a ton of potential here, but this is kind of right. The brain goes squirrely on a day like this where there's a whole bunch of shenanigans that kind of start landsliding through the timeline here if everything is to line up the way the Oilers need it to keep McDavid and Draisaitl year in, year out, win, win, win. So that's really it for you today. I am up on out of here for now. We'll discuss after this after work today, and we'll get going for another edition. But for right now, I am up on gone.